Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Leonard and I'm back to perform a science experiment today. Today, we will be using this Pennsylvania State Standard and we will be performing a scientific investigation to answer a question using scientific tools and facts. The question that I want to answer today is, how does food coloring react in different liquids, specifically water and vegetable oil? The ingredients that I will need to perform this investigation are water, vegetable oil, and food coloring. The scientific tools I will need are a stopwatch and a liquid measuring cup. Before we begin, I will make a guess to see how I think food coloring will react in the different liquids. This is called a hypothesis. Personally, I don't think that the type of liquid will have any effect on how the food coloring will react. I think that when I use my blue food coloring in water, oil, and a mixture of oil and water, it will turn all three liquids a light shade of blue, and it won't be hazy, it'll be a clear blue. That's my hypothesis. You can make your own. The first thing we need to make sure we do is make sure our trials are consistent. That means we are using the same amount of liquid. I'm going to use 1 cup for every trial, and we are leaving the food coloring in our liquids for the same amount of time. I'm going to do it for 2 minutes. This is really important because food coloring might react differently in a big cup of water versus a teaspoon of water, and it might react differently if you leave it in for 10 minutes versus 2 minutes. So I am going to use my scientific tools, my stopwatch, and my measuring cup to make sure all of my trials are consistent, which is a fancy word to say the same. I'm going to begin my trial. Here I have a little clear cup that I'm going to use. I'm going to pour in my cup of water. Our first trial will just be how 2 drops of blue food coloring react in 1 cup of water over the course of 2 minutes. Here's my food coloring, and I just want to put 2 drops. Before I begin, I'm going to set 2 minutes on my timer. 2 drops in my cup, and the time is counting down. Okay, so my trial 1 is up, and looking at my cup, it looks like it pretty much mixed up all the way through, but we have a lot of color on the bottom. So what we're going to do is write down this observation so we don't forget it when we do our next 2 trials. Okay, now that we did trial 1 with just water, we'll be doing trial 2 with just oil. I have my measuring cup here to make sure that my values stay consistent. So we need 1 cup of vegetable oil. And I have to make sure that the oil goes right up to that 1 cup line. Because if it's too much or too little, it's not going to be constant with my last trial. You can see I have exactly 1 cup here. And I'm going to add 2 drops of oil, just like our last trial, and start my 2-minute timer. So there's 1, 2, timer is started. Okay, boys and girls, that's actually really cool. Our food coloring did not move at all in that whole 2 minutes. It just stayed in its droplets. So it did not do the same thing that it did in the water. And now I have to record my observation. On my data sheet, I wrote that the food coloring stayed as 2 drops. It did not spread out. Okay, for trial 3, I have my half cup of water here. I'm going to pour in now half a cup of oil and my water. I see that the oil is actually floating on top. I wonder why that is, and I wonder if that has anything to do with our drops not spreading out in the oil. I'm gonna put my drops in. I have my timer ready, and we will see how the drops react after 2 minutes in the water and oil mixture. Okay, there's about a minute left in this trial, and it looks like the food coloring drop has stayed intact as it's traveled through the oil layer. And I have a feeling that if it reaches the water layer in the next minute, it will spread out like it did in the water. We will see how this turns out. So here we have our jar, and the food coloring droplet through 2 minutes stayed suspended in the oil layer. So I will record that on my observation sheet. On my observation sheet for trial 3, I said that they stayed on top, the oil stayed on top of the water and the food coloring drops stayed intact through the oil layer. Now we have to decide if my hypothesis was correct. I said that the food coloring would react the same way no matter what liquid it was in. It turns out I was wrong. That's okay, because in science, the reason why we do experiments is to test our hypothesis. We used facts to collect our data. We used scientific tools, like a measuring cup and a stopwatch, to keep all of our trials the same, and our conclusion is food coloring spreads out in water, but not in oil. And I'm going to go even further and make an inference, or I'm going to guess why it does this. I think it's because oil is a little thicker than water, and the food coloring droplets don't have room to spread out. Feel free to do this experiment at home. It doesn't take too many tools or ingredients, or you can make your own experiment as long as you ask a question and use facts and tools to answer it.